Greetings, I'm Ari, and pay attention because Israel a few hours ago attacked key targets in Yemen right in the heart of Sana'a, a capital controlled, of course, by the Houthis. It's the first time they've struck in this way, hitting facilities that until now seemed untouchable by the regime, or at least that Israel had never touched before. The inevitable question is what message Israel is sending with this move and how far the conflict might escalate. Let's get to the point. The Israeli Air Force sent over 10 aircraft on a mission covering 2,000 kilometers lasting about 5.5 hours. During the attack, about 3 precision munitions were launched against very specific targets. The presidential complex in Sana'a, the Aisaz and Azar power plants, fuel storage facilities, and areas where the Houthis have ballistic missile capabilities. They were not random targets, of course. Each of them represents the military and energy infrastructure that supports this militia. The presidential palace is not just a symbol of power in any country. In the specific case of Yemen, the Houthi forces operated from the presidential palace with tunnels and bunkers that served as a command center. Attacking it directly hits their chain of command. Power plants, on the other hand, supply both military operations and the industry needed to keep their war machine running. In other words, Israel sought to paralyze the logistical muscle of the Houthis and made it clear that their ability to launch missiles will not go unpunished. What's interesting is that until now, most of the Israeli attacks had been concentrated in the port area of Odida, precisely to cut off supplies and stop the smuggling of weapons. But what happened today is different. Bringing the fire to the heart of Sana'a means entering a new stage of the confrontation. And although some of the sites hit had already suffered damage in previous attacks, this time the magnitude is very different. The impact is reflected in the power outages in areas under Houthi control and in the obvious pressure that Israel is trying to impose. The images that are coming in and starting to circulate on different networks, especially on Arab networks, can be seen on screen and are impressive. Regarding the power of the Israeli attack, as is customary from the Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli Air Force shares with us images of the preparations leading up to the attack. And you can see all the logistics involved on the screen. Just hours before the planes began this long flight to the southern hemisphere, specifically to Yemen. And the message is more than clear and forceful. Launching missiles against Israeli territory comes at a very high price. And the Air Force is ready to reach any point if necessary. And it was obviously demonstrated. Meanwhile, this whole attack from Yemen doesn't come out of nowhere. It was the direct response to what happened on Friday when the Houthis launched a ballistic missile with very particular characteristics toward Israel. After the investigation that took place here in Israel over these 2 days, it was determined that the missile carried a cluster warhead. What does this mean? The kind of a conventional missile that strikes with a single unit? This type of weapon opens in the air and disperses several much smaller submunitions, each with its own explosive charge. It's kind of like the missile splits into many others. In theory, this makes defense much more complicated because it's not about intercepting a single target, but neutralizing multiple fragments that fall over several kilometers. In practice, what happened was that the Israeli radars interpreted that dispersion as if the missile had disintegrated on its own. That caused confusion and led to some interception attempts not being effective. In the end, only 1 or 2 of those submunitions managed to cross the border and detonate on Israeli territory. One of them fell in the backyard of a house in an area in Ginatun, leaving a small crater. On a military level, the physical damage was minimal, roughly comparable to the impact of a rocket. Kazan, those that used to be fired from Gaza. But what's concerning is the message this sends. The Houthis, probably with Iranian advice, or definitely with Iranian advice, are looking for ways to challenge the Israeli defense systems. It's not a coincidence. Does Iran have ballistic missiles with cluster warheads? And this technology evidently ended up in Yemen in the hands of the Houthis. The problem is that this type of weaponry puts Israel's Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems to the test as they are designed to intercept the threat before the warhead fragments. In this case, they did not come into action, and that raises questions. Not because Israel lacks the capability, but because the attack was different from usual. And that new development forces a reconsideration of different strategies. In summary, the missile did not manage to cause major damage, but it did raise the alarm. The Houthis wanted to show that they have new tricks up their sleeve, and that they're not satisfied with the usual drones and rockets they launch almost every week now. And most importantly, behind each launch, is it just Yemen or is Iran pulling the strings? I've seen messages in the comments where people tell me they can't subscribe to the channel, that they don't see the button to do it. I'm asking you to check if this happens to you too. And obviously, if you're not subscribed, all you have to do is tap the button that says subscribe, and that's it. Plus, it's free. Remember that we also have the private WhatsApp news group for all channel members, where we share daily news about what's happening here in Israel. That is real-time information. All right, now let's move on to the media. The Houthis are already selling their own version. Reuters today quoted a Yemeni newspaper not affiliated with the Sana'a movement. That is what we could call the country's official press, where the headline was, and you can see the front page on the screen. The entity is collapsing, referring to Israel. A Yemeni attack with multiple warheads penetrated deep into the enemy's defenses. Well, the reality is that these kinds of headlines aren't meant to describe what happened or report the facts, but rather to maintain morale and create a sense of constant victory. In an information ecosystem controlled by a militia, a lot of people end up seeing a different reality, obviously that of a totally collapsed Israel, even though the facts on the ground indicate otherwise. And be careful, this doesn't just happen there. In the West, there are also bubbles that amplify videos out of context and viral narratives. We already saw it in the 12-day war between Israel and Iran, when more than one person imagined Israel. Almost half the country was imagined destroyed by stories that didn't match the official reports and damage assessments. And a number of fake images and videos created with artificial intelligence, which people in the West had no problem consuming as reality. In the end, it's the same dynamic: propaganda, confirmation bias, and the rush to push a narrative before the facts are clear. That's why I insist here on separating noise from facts and calmly explaining what happened, and specifically what's happening now. Even sharing those images, those fake videos in many videos, which are created by this entire media system that's hostile to Israel in order to generate a bad reputation in the West. And well, when we talk about Yemen and the Houthis, we inevitably end up talking about Iran. Because in the end, every missile changes, every drone and every attempted attack from Yemen has the same signature: Tehran. In the last few hours, a former Israeli military intelligence officer warned that what he called a second round against Iran is being prepared. According to his analysis, the humiliation suffered in recent months is not something Tehran can let go. There are clear signs that a response is brewing, and not only through Yemen, but also from the concrete Lebanese front. In fact, reports indicate that Hezbollah operatives have been instructed to disconnect from their mobile phones. A detail that may seem minor, but in military intelligence, it's an unmistakable sign. Something is brewing, something is being planned. And the question is whether that something will be a direct offensive against Israel or a series of attacks through its allies in the region. We have already seen in the latest statements from Khamenei and various high-ranking officials of the Iranian regime that they are not willing to stop their nuclear development. They are already proclaiming it everywhere that they will not stop until they achieve their goal. The reality is that today the Middle East looks like a chessboard where every piece moves with great caution. But everyone knows that a wider war could break out at any moment. Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Iraq represent the same conflict in different forms. And what we've seen today in Sana'a could be just the prelude to a larger confrontation. A pause, For those who don't know, I have another channel called ARI 404 where I cover global topics like geopolitics, the world economy, and high impact events. It's a channel where I try to show you what's really going on behind the scenes, what they don't tell you on television or in mainstream media. So I invite you to visit ARI 404 to subscribe, of course, and to share the channel. You can find the link in the description or just type ARI 404 in the YouTube search bar. And before we finish, let's go with an important update on the situation in Gaza as part of the plan to evacuate the population from Gaza City. Before the planned offensive incursion by the Israel Defense Forces, which aims to take over the entire city of Gaza, the European hospital in eastern Khan Yunis is being reactivated. This isn't just any place, we know it's very famous. It was there in May that the Israel Defense Forces eliminated Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of the visible head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, after his death. And well, his brother had taken command, and there he went down to the hospital in the tunnels. He was eliminated. And in June, that's also where the Golani Brigade operated on the ground. Now, this hospital will take on the role of the medical centers for the evacuees from Gaza City, like Shifa and Al-Makdama. It will serve the population that will be moved to Al-Mawasi, an area that is being expanded and prepared for this purpose for all this movement of civilians. The Israel Defense Forces at this moment, this week they focused on paving the access roads that lead to this area, specifically to the Rafah hospital. And in addition, they plan to set up field hospitals in the area where the evacuees are. All of this obviously shows that the operation is not only military, but also involves a huge logistical and humanitarian effort to be able to manage and control. The day after the capture of Gaza City, and everything we've talked about leaves us with many unanswered questions. To what extent can the attacks in Sana'a hinder the military capability of the Houthis, or do they simply push them to look for new ways to strike Israel? We are entering the prelude to a second round with Iran, which could drag the entire region back into war, even greater than what we saw in those 12 days and in Gaza. Will these humanitarian measures be enough to provide stability to the evacuated civilian population, or will they just open a new chapter in a conflict that seems to have no end in sight? Do your opinions really add value? The analysis I built allow me to understand what you are thinking. What does the audience of this channel understand, and how do they interpret this whole situation? Don't leave without leaving your like, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course share this video. See you!